Story.
Good afternoon, I'm Olivia Otieno. This is Double O Direct every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on 94.4 Spice FM, streaming live, standardmedia.co.ke. I'd also like to welcome everyone watching on KTN News. I'm with a woman who needs absolutely no introduction, but it is my privilege to do so. The iconic, the globally recognized PR maven, Gina Din PR. Welcome to Double O Direct.
Thank you. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. Such a pleasure to be here, finally.
I have wanted this for years.
And I know we've talked about it as well, so I'm glad we're both here, both managed to make the time, and I'm excited for the conversation.
When your book came out, Daughter of Africa, I shed a tear.
Oh, that's nice.
I shed a tear and I went looking for it. I got a copy. Then my sister came in from Canada and took it.
Oh, okay. Is she enjoying it?
She loves it.
Good.
She absolutely loves it.
Good,
She's been a big fan for many, many years.
Oh, nice.
Then I went round to look for it again, and it was so hard to find.
Yeah, it was sold out pretty fast.
That is a testimony to how powerful the content within Daughter of Africa is.
I think so. I mean, I think it's, a story that resonates with many women because it's not unique to me. I just happen to be the one that sat down to write the story. But I do think we have so many incredible stories amongst so many women on the continent. So I hope the book will be a bridge to getting more women to write.
For me, I know you as a woman who has achieved so much in business, a woman who has impacted lives through her work in PR,
Thank you.
and also a woman who has shown us that you can have a family life and a business life and a life that's caring for the community at large. I would like to start off with Gina Din, pre-Gina Din PR, and understand who the woman who created this amazing company was growing up.
So, as you probably read in my book, I was born in the UK, grew up, spent very happy and magical childhood, went to school in Limuru, hated every single minute of it, wasn't a good student, went on to do journalism, and then joined Barclays Bank, where I created and headed the PR department of the bank, and did that for 14 years, and which I absolutely loved. I was very young. I was quite surprised that they gave me the authority and the autonomy that they did, but they did. And I was able to, to make Barclays a really incredible brand. So that was my background before I started my business.
You experienced whilst in the UK studying. A lot of Kenyans have the hope to study abroad. Some have gone, some have not. And now the doors are opening for more and more Kenyans and more young women to have that experience. As a woman who grew up in Nyanyuki, surrounded by relatively close family and friends, what was the experience like to leave the nest, so to speak?
So it was always expected. I mean, I knew that I have 3 older sisters, and so I knew that my turn would come. They all went to Europe. I went to the UK. And it was great. I mean, I loved every minute of it. I still absolutely love London, know London very well. And so I enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting lots of different people from many different countries. And London is such an incredible melting pot. And I fitted right in.
Your time at Barclays, an iconic brand, hugely phenomenal, successful business, coming out of university and joining the bank here. What were some of the perceptions you had of working for such an organization? Because up until then, you'd had the relative security of working, so to speak, in a family setting.
Sure. Well, it was very interesting because I had never really thought that I'd end up working for such a big brand. But I did, and it was actually interesting because there weren't very many women in management at that time, and they definitely weren't many role models that were women. So, a lot of my role models at that time were men who were incredible and who really midwifed me getting into corporate. but I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I loved being able to create, and the bank were very very brave in allowing me that space.
Wonderful. Understanding your upbringing, having been born in Nyanyuki, there were some remarks when your book came out with the title Daughter of Africa. Is she really African? And there were a lot of question marks around that title. What do you have to say to that?
Why? I'm African. I mean, my mother, my grandmother, and I were born on this continent. But either way, I think Kwame Nkrumah puts it very well when he says, I'm not African because I was born in Africa. I'm African because Africa was born in me. So that's very much, and I think I represent the diversity of the continent. The people that look like me, the people that look like you. So I think it doesn't really bother me because I know what I am. It's not what people say; it's how you respond to what people say, and I'm totally comfortable. And I'm very, very clearly a daughter of Africa.
I've had the fortune to read your book. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to take the angle of someone who has not yet, mm-hmm. because otherwise there'll be too many spoilers. So with regards to your professional ethos, ethics, even drive, how much of that has been influenced by your family?
A lot in my journey as an entrepreneur. I mean, my parents were both entrepreneurs. I'm from a family of entrepreneurs. My sisters all have been running their own businesses. But, I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time with my father, and he was a huge influence in teaching me how to run a business. Even though it was a family business, some of the, what he taught me stayed with me when I ended up having my own business. And my own business is very much a family business as well. It was, it was us, but it was also very much us creating a family for many other people. And so I took all those lessons with me.
At what point during your time at Barclays did you decide, I like this, I've been privileged to be here, but it's time for me to follow in the footsteps of my family and become an entrepreneur? How did that come about?
It was really interesting because every year I would get promoted, I'd get a new title, I'd get more money, but I was not a banker. And so there was never a point that I was going to run Barclays Bank. That was clear. And I wanted to be, I wanted to get to the top of my game, and I wanted to do something for myself. I had two very young children at the time, and I was under this perception that I was going to leave and suddenly have more money and have more time. And it turned out that initially I had neither. But I did end up not only creating a brand for myself, but creating an industry, not just for Kenya, but for the continent. I'm very proud of the work that we did.
Your first client, your former employer.
Yes, yes, I was very fortunate that Barclays became my anchor client. And so I was pretty much doing what I was doing for them in-house, but now as a consultant. And so I was very, very lucky that, I had a 3-year contract, and that paid my bills while I started hustling for other clients. But it was interesting to now be on the outside and be able to be a lot more objective and to see the brand with a fresh set of eyes and be able to say, oh, actually, I think we could do things differently. So it was a great experience. But then I went straight on to, many other clients after that. And within the first year, I think we were very busy, very, very busy.
It's no secret the number of accolades that you won in your field. They've been told many, many times,
sure.
Now in the digital era. Were there any that surprised you? Or you look upon and say, wow, we deserve that because we really did put in a lot of work on this?
I think it's very exciting to win awards. We'd won a lot of awards in Kenya. But I think it's when you start competing on the global stage and you start getting recognized for your work globally, that's when it's very exciting. But people see the awards and they see the finished product, but they don't realize what goes on to get that finished product. And so I'm always very grateful to the people on my team that work so hard so that we could actually compete globally. And I'm so proud of the work that we've done, really. So sitting in New York one day, at an event for a global award, and I'm just sitting there and I'm trying to take it all in. It's So pretty exciting stuff.
The excitement must have been, of course, creating the mold for PR in the region and then going around and breaking that same mold so many times over. So my question to you, because you mentioned that it was quite a challenge for you to have, you know, mentors and anchors and people who were in the industry that you could look up to and try to learn from, because there simply weren't that many. And the industry was so small. So what can you tell me about that?
So my role models weren't in the industry,
Yes.
you know, because they weren't there, you know. But my role models were captains of industries that were able to trust me with their brands, and that's a huge thing to do, because you're trusting an outsider with your reputation, so we became the scaffolding, if you like, for clients, you know, and we would have to take very deep dives into brands and actually see, you know, what they actually stood for. It might have been very different from what they said they stood for. And so I feel very lucky and privileged to have had access to some of the best brains on the continent, whether that was in corporate, whether that was politically, whether that was in the non-profit. And they became my mentors. So it wasn't really mentors in the industry.
Yes. Every business has its ups and downs and its risks. As the captain of the ship that you are steering, can you highlight some of the instances where you were like, this either has never been done before, this could go well or it could go terribly, but we're going to take that risk?
I think for me it was really Safaricom. You know, that we got that when we were maybe a year old as a business, you know, and it was this huge life-changing product that Kenyans didn't even know that they needed. They were providing a solution for a problem that we didn't even know we had. And so I think for me it was just being able to be brave enough. And I really do appreciate Michael Joseph, because, you know, he trusted us. And together we were able to co-create for the Safaricom brand. And I think that's powerful, but it's also very risky, because if it doesn't go right, you know, everything can fall. But we did it, and it was very much synergy between me and him, and our energies just worked together. We fought, but, you know, in a good way. And for him it was a risk as well, because not only was he creating the Safaricom brand, he was also creating a new industry. So we were both in very similar positions, in that I was also creating an industry in my path, and he was creating an industry in what he was doing.
Yes.
But so I think the biggest risk I took, and probably the best one, was actually help co-create the Safaricom brand.
That is phenomenal. As a woman in leadership, as an industry leader in and of your own right, women globally are judged more harshly on several fronts. The first, of course, being the work-life balance. You mentioned as you were in infancy, Gina Din PR, that you also had young children. For women who are considering embarking on entrepreneurship, because there's the security in employment, what can you relate with regards to your experience?
So I never see myself as a woman leader. I see myself as a leader, and I compete with, you know, with leaders, men and women. And yes, there's the additional responsibility of, you know, it ends up being the woman's responsibility when it comes to raising a family. But I do think, you know, if you really decide that you're going to have the balance, you can have it all. And I was very fortunate in that I had, you know, great support at home, in my staff, but I also was able to carve out time to spend with my children. And it's all about what you decide you want it to be, right? I mean, you can decide that you want to spend 80% of your time in your office, or you want to spend, and I wanted to do as much as I can for both. I wanted to give both adequate attention. I was growing children, I was also growing a business, and they both needed equal attention. I'm very fortunate that I was able to do that, but I also worked with very strong professionals who were able to create this brand with me.
With regards to crisis management,
yes,
there's a lot of communications that goes out with regards to crises and crisis management. Are there any particular incidences that you'd like to recount?
I think the Kenya Airways crash clearly is, probably the best and the hardest work that we did around a crisis. Plane crashes, just by their very nature, are, so absolutely tragic and awful. Yes. But I do think that we worked really hard to ensure that it was communicated well, as hard as it was for all of us. It was very hard, given that my husband was a Kenya Airways pilot as well. So I could feel it from an employee point of view. I could feel it from a passenger point of view. I could feel it from a family point of view. But we put in some really long hours to ensure that that crisis was well communicated. And I'm very proud of that work.
Yes, having been in the audience and listening to the communications that was being sent out, we felt very well informed. We also felt that there was a lot of communication that was going round, so that you didn't feel like you were in the dark, especially with regards to those who were looking out for their loved ones, wondering what happened.
Yeah, it was just awful. I mean, it really was. It's something that you never want to do again. But if you're going to be in that situation, I think my team and I really handled it well. We were there for the families. We were there for the management.
Yes.
And we were able to walk the journey with them. And actually, some of the people that lost family during that crash from other parts of the world remain my friends. I've been invited to weddings and, met their children, and it's just been, there was a real connection.
You mentioned that your husband is a Kenya Airways pilot, and of course, being of different ethnicities, there was a blending of cultures in your union. Could you expound on that? Maybe how you met and what attracted you to him, but also, raising an interracial family.
Yeah, so we met when we were both quite young. We met in Kariuki. He was in the Air Force. But, at that time, it was a very unique situation, and one in which both families were very nervous about. But we stood firm, and over time everyone has come through the prejudices and the biases that they might have had. And he's a very special and unique person. I always say he has something which I see as like a Michelangelo syndrome, in which he sees the best in everything. And he's taught me and grounded me to be that way, is to see the good in everything. And so, my family love him. Who can't? He's a really special, very, very special person, a wonderful, wonderful father to our two children. And when it comes to bringing up two children that are from different cultures, I never say that they're half of anything. I think they're 100% of each. And they display the traits beautifully of being 100% of both cultures. So I'm very proud of them.
We will circle on to your amazing children in just a bit, but to your other child, which was Gina Din PR.
Sure.
Before we get into the process of purchase, the process of seeing something you've created, blood, sweat, tears, grit, overcoming so many challenges, obstacles, and putting it now on a global platform for it to be scrutinized. Do you want to run me through some particular moments, highlights, maybe the best of reel in your eyes?
Yeah, so I'm a sort of firm believer of doing many things in one's life. I think we contain multitudes of things that we can do. And so I'd spent my entire life doing PR, and I loved every single minute of it. But there was so much more that I wanted to do. And it was clear that none of my children would be taking over this business that I'd created. And so we started looking for possible partnerships. And actually, we were contacted by Edelman, who are the largest PR company in the world.
Wait. I love that. Your light was shining so bright with regards to PR in the region that they contacted you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they contacted us.
Incredible.
Yeah, they contacted us, and then began a very long and drawn-out due diligence process. It's quite intimidating, actually, to have, an American company come and scrutinize your business. They can afford the best lawyers, the best accountants, and they're coming to look through everything that you've done. It was difficult. The team that comes to negotiate with you, none of them look like you. Yes. So they're very different. And then you're trying to find a place where you can meet in the middle.
Yes.
But it was long, and it was very soul destroying in many ways.
Can you walk me through that journey from timelines, meetings? You going to the US? Is that something you can?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you meet. They come for the initial chat.
Yeah.
They like what you do. You take them through, your client base, your staff, potential clients.
Yes. The books.
Well, the books comes later. So, everything's fine initially, like, oh, this is exciting. And you go for your meetings and, in the States, in London, South Africa, which was in my case. And then they come and start going through everything that you've done and, pick out lots of things that they want to know more about, which is all fine,
yes.
Because that's what due diligence is about.
Yes.
It's just the length of time that it took. It was a very, very long process and difficult. There are times I'm just like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't really need to, because I didn't have to sell.
Yes.
It was just something that I wanted to try and do different things before I reached 60.
But the selling in and of itself is such an achievement. But what you're saying is that it is a grueling process, and that most people are not ready. We basically, with regards to Kenyan businesses and Kenyan entrepreneurs, business owners, it may seem glamorous. It may seem like, wow, that was a nice, acquisition and a nice chunk of cash on the side. But they're not actually prepared for the depth at which the team goes into when they come in.
Strips you. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted. You have to have a certain amount of grit to be able to go through that process. And it's not easy.
Yes.
And there were times that I was just like, I actually don't need to do this. I don't want to.
Okay.
But then we always seemed so close.
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, another 3 months. And before we knew it, it was like 2.5 years of due diligence.
2.5 years? With people stationed on the ground constantly?
Well, they were here often.
Yes.
But, there was a lot of to and fro on email and lawyers and all that kind of stuff, all the unsexy stuff of businesses.
Yes.
So it was a crazy period. It was a crazy period, but I'm very fortunate and glad that it happened.
Yes.
Because, COVID happened. And so just as soon as I'd been acquired, then COVID hit us. And I think it would have been very hard to have gone through COVID.
Just to understand, with regards to Gina Din PR, so much work was covered over the years. But if you were to put together a highlight reel and just bullet point the major works or the major highlights of your time heading it, give me an overview.
That's a hard one. We did so much. It was 23 very eventful years. But obviously, Safaricom was one of our highlights. Kenya Airways, Kenya Commercial Bank. And actually, it's really funny because the CEO of Kenya Commercial Bank was Martin Odworo-Otieno, who I worked with at Barclays. And so when I was getting ready to leave Barclays, he took me out for lunch. And he said to me, I cannot understand why you're leaving. He said, being an entrepreneur is not that easy. And it's a wilderness out there. You sure you want to leave? And I said to him, you know what? I think I'm the wilderness. I think I'll be okay. I think I am the wilderness. So it was really lovely to have Martin back in KCB and for us to work together again. And we did some really good work for KCB. I really enjoyed. I think the synergy between the CEO and the agency is so important. And if you can have that level of trust, where they know that I have their back. Because don't forget, with PR, you have to take a very deep dive into brands, really deep, and like, are you sure this is how you want to be perceived? And if not, what are you doing to correct some of the issues that you might have?
Yes.
So I think that connection is important. So every CEO I've worked with has had an incredible level of trust. We worked with the governor of the central bank, the current governor, when he first came back.
Yes.
And again, you know, that was incredible. I did not know him, and he didn't know me. But we met and we just connected, and I was able to help them navigate some of the areas in the central bank that needed doing, from internal PR to external. But out of that, we've developed a very trustworthy relationship. Yes. I really like who he is.
Yes.
And so a lot of my clients have ended up being my friends, which is really nice.
I'm with PR authority Gina Din Kariuki. This is a special 00 Direct, live from her home. We'll be right back.
KTN News. Get the whole story. KTN News. Get the whole story.
Welcome back. I'm Olivia Otieno. This is 00 Direct, live on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi. We're also streaming live on the homepage, standardmedia.co.ke. Welcome to you all, plus those joining us simulcasting on KTN News. You mentioned something earlier which was so poignant. You're not a woman leader, you're a leader. With regards to your leadership, with regards to the leaders that you have had the opportunity to meet, living or not, are you able to craft for me the traits, the characteristics of a good leader? Because we're not just talking about a man or a woman, we're not talking about public sector or private sector, we're talking about leadership in general, whether it's even just the leader of a head of a household.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually when you look at, and I will look at some of the, interesting people that I've met, like I said, Mandela or Obama, or, people that run industries in Kenya, the Michael Josephs, the late Bob Collymore. And I think the one trait that I saw in them that was successful wasn't that they were looking at the return on investment from a revenue point of view. It was that they were intrinsically kind. And I think that for me was just such a strong, realization that kindness in leaders is everything. And that's the one thing that I saw as a common thread in all those people was kindness. And kindness is so powerful. Just being a leader that is able to put aside for a minute how much money they were going to make, to being what kind of, what impact, what was their return on investment when it came to just being kind.
True. So true. You have accomplished and achieved so much, birthing a company that then was a shining beacon for the region that attracted foreign investment. You've raised 2 amazing children. Before I ask you about what it took, from a mental and a physical health perspective.
Sure.
Let me ask you about that journey through motherhood, because your daughter is a professor.
She is.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about your two children.
Yeah, they're incredible. I mean, they're my largest source of joy, my inspiration, and they're just very strong characters in their own way in their different fields. So Natalia is a professor, English literature professor, but not only that, she's 16th, 17th century travel writing professor.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's
highly specialized.
Very specialized, very niche.
Yes.
But I just love what she does, and I love the fact that she found this very interesting niche and decided she would be the best that she possibly could at it, and she's incredible. And I'm so proud of her. We're really great friends. She was such a big inspiration for my book.
Yes.
In terms of, Mom, you've got to do it.
Yes.
So you need to get this done. But I couldn't have asked for a closer friend than I have in Natalia.
Yes.
Her birth was a little traumatic. She was born very early, premature baby, had a very difficult few weeks when she was born. But she's a fighter and she's a survivor, and I marvel at everything that she does, and I see her often, and I'm just so proud of hearing about her lectures and her writings and just her determination and also the kindness in which she treats her students. I think I'm absolutely very proud of her.
I had the fortune to meet her.
That's right, you did.
Late last year, it was really, really a privilege. And your husband too, at that amazing function that we attended. But your son was not there, was he?
Wasn't he? No, he might have not arrived yet, so he probably came a little later in December. So Nathan is a football recruitment analyst in the UK. Yes. Has 3 degrees in football.
Wow.
I didn't know it was possible, but he assured me that that they were all there, and I was like, "You want to do what?
Yes.
You want to do a degree in what?" And he said,
yes.
"In football." And I'm like, "That's what you do for fun."
Yes.
Like, who does football? But Nathan's a charmer in our family, and he had everything ready to show me.
Yes.
And I think he kind of softened it a little bit, because knowing that I'm a businesswoman, saying actually it's football business, and so I was like, okay, well that's okay. And so he did his first degree, and then he did his second degree, and then during COVID he did his third degree. And so he looks for talent, and he's loving what he's doing. He's living in the UK. We're just so proud of both of them for having 2 completely different journeys.
Yes.
And the fact that they're creating lives for themselves outside of their comfort zone, which is here, which is a lot easier. But really, deciding that they're going to be at the top of their game wherever they are. And so it's incredible.
Culturally, we've noticed a lot of families who start businesses. The children are indoctrinated quite young. They're there after school. They're there on the weekends. They're kind of molded and positioned to then take over the family business. What advice do you have for allowing your children to grow their own wings and soar into their own chosen fields?
So I think it was probably the opposite for me. My children spent a lot of time in my office.
Yes.
A lot of time. After school, every day, they'd do their homework in the office. Every event I went to, if they were off school, they'd come with me. And I think that totally put them off. So I think it worked the opposite. They were very clear that's not what they wanted to do. But, my business was my dream. And that was made very clear to me by my kids. Like, okay, that was your dream. And I needed them to go ahead and have their own dreams. Otherwise, if it had been if that was the case, then I would be living in Kariuki, running my parents' hotel.
True.
Which so I think kids need to be allowed to. We keep raising them to be independent. Then when they get independent, we're like, no, we didn't mean it. We didn't really mean that fast,
Yes.
But no, I'm very proud of them, and I really believe in allowing everyone to actually develop to their own potential and what they love to do.
I'm glad you mentioned your parents' hotel, because your father never saw you as Gina Din PR Maven.
No.
He never saw you as
Did not.
a mother.
No.
How do you communicate what you learned from him? Because I understand he was very impactful in your upbringing and his character, his work ethic, his general ethos on life. How do you communicate that to your children? What do you say about their grandfather?
So we never act like he's not here. You know, we like he's very present in our lives. He was definitely a larger than life character.
Yes.
So a lot of what we do or who we are is because of who he was to me. So my parents, you know, my parents are very alive in my children's minds. And they know everything. They know everything about him. They know all the stories, and we talk about it on a regular basis. Luckily, my sisters and I, you know, have had such a great relationship with our parents, and so they're very present. They're really very present. Writing the book, I think, actually helped with that, because there were things that maybe I hadn't told them or had slipped, and then, you know, my kids were like, "Oh, really? That happened? Oh, you know, so this is what your dad said." Or so I think the book really helped in also adding on to who my father and my mother were.
Speaking of the book, as you transitioned from running Gina Din PR into Gina Din, Daughter of Africa, now a Pan-African icon, a Pan-African voice, how did that come about with regards to this has to be done?
So it was a bucket list item that I always wanted to do. I just didn't think I would do it when I did it.
Yes.
So it's always something that, oh, you know, one day I'll write a book.
We all say that.
We all say that. One day we'll write a book. But then COVID happened. And so, you know, I'm suddenly, because I travel a lot, I mean, I'm not still enough where I could actually sit down to write. But COVID happened, and I had no choice but to be still.
Yes.
And my daughter was like, "Mom, why don't you go ahead and write your book?" And I was like, "I'm not really ready to write my book." But then I started, you know, every day I'd journal a little bit, and before I knew it, I had enough for a manuscript.
Yes.
But it's still quite scary, and, you know, it's quite a vulnerable thing to do, is to put your story out there, because you just don't know how it's going to be received. So I'd written, and everything was ready, and then I'm just like, okay, it's fine now, I've written it, but it's not going to go anywhere, because I'll come back to it in a few years, and, you know, and I'll revisit it.
Yes.
And my kids were like, so you just spent like a year and a half of your life,
yes,
and now you're not going to have your book out there, you know. And so they very lovingly convinced me that it was okay, I could put it up there. And it was important, I needed that permission.
I love that, the fact that it was a family project, so to speak. Some
Definitely.
people did some arts and crafts, some went into carpentry, you all came together and you have this amazing book. Your process in identifying a publisher and in deciding that...
So I self-published,
yes,
on Amazon, and it was actually a pretty straightforward process.
Yes.
But it's a lot, you know, it's a lot to write, to choose, and to trust the people that are going to edit for you. I was very fortunate, and I had the most incredible editors who knew me, you know, and would make sure that the ethos of who I wasn't lost in the edit.
Yes.
But it was very much a family project. You know, my sisters would send in stuff that they remembered. I had cousins who live in Canada that knew a lot more about my father's side of the family,
yes,
that I didn't, and so they were able to research stuff and get me things that I didn't have. They were very sweet. I really don't see them that much, but as soon as I called them, they were there. My husband would spend hours going through chapters, and so it was very, very much a family project. It was fun. I'm glad I did it.
I've been told that journaling can be very therapeutic, and here you are with an entire book, an autobiography. Mentally and psychologically, can you talk me through that process of really disseminating into the minutiae, you know, your life and your past?
It's therapeutic, can also be very triggering.
Yes.
You know, so there were parts of my life that, you know, you just have mental blocks because the pain of, you know, the deaths of my parents, for instance, were hard, you know, and so going back and trying to relive that was, you know, triggering, and then you're sitting there and you've got tears because you've just written all this stuff. Yes. You're like, I'm not going to do this, I can't do this, and I'm going to give it a break. And you take some time out and you heal, and then you revisit and then you start again. So it's not easy, but I'm very glad that I did it. I really feel that I needed to get the story out there. And I really wanted to honor my parents. And, you know, the book is dedicated to them because they were incredible people. You know, they were incredible people who did amazing things at a time when it wasn't that easy to do some of the things that they did. But yeah, it was definitely triggering. I think at the end of writing the book, you kind of realize, okay, I've climbed that mountain. Then you realize there are more mountains to climb.
Yes.
But also you appreciate the climb, right? You appreciate how far you've come.
Yes.
And you appreciate, and you look back, and I look back with joy and with happiness and with pride.
Yes.
And yet I know I have another mountain, you know, and I'm getting excited for my next climb.
Speaking of your next climb, since publication, what has surprised you most with regards to Daughters of Africa, perhaps how it's been received generally in East Africa, globally?
So really interesting for me was actually the number of untold stories. You know, I've done events here in Rwanda and South Africa. I'm actually headed to Oxford for an event with the book next week. But I think for me a powerful afternoon was in South Africa. We did a storytelling circle of women.
Yes.
And the power of the stories of these women was just, I mean, at some point I was like, I just kept quiet because I just wanted to absorb the stories of these women. And I just thought, you know, stories matter, all stories matter. So everybody has a story. And, you know, African women are we are just storytellers, right? Our grandmothers told stories, our house helps told our children stories. And so, you know, I really hope and pray that my book will be a bridge to getting more women to tell their stories.
Yes.
And you know, I know it's not going to be possible for women to sit down and write because it takes a lot to do that. But I'm creating this digital platform where we're getting women to tell the stories in their words.
Yes.
And have that available to the many daughters of Africa and the incredible women of the continent so that they can tell us who they are and tell us their journey. It's fascinating. The journeys are fascinating.
I love that because I feel sometimes that given the opportunity, more women would, but they don't know where are the safe spaces in which they can tell their story. So understanding the life of Daughter of Africa, not just the book, but then the movement with the platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and your thinking behind going into that direction?
Yeah, so we've just finished the pilot. We've done 10 incredible stories, 10 incredible women, each with a very different story, but each with wisdom that they're imparting for the next generation. On potential. You know, you look at some of the stories and you're like, wow, can't believe you did that.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'm hoping that once we've got this pilot up, that we'll be able to raise the investment that's required to actually take the platform across the continent and to be able to capture some of this fascinating stories from the women, because we need to tell our stories. If we don't, somebody's telling our story for us. That's for sure. And they're controlling the narrative. So, you know, if we want to tell our own stories, then, and we want the narrative to be the true narrative of what it is, then we need to tell the story.
I was so surprised that through your autobiography, there are things about Kenya, there are things about East Africa that I learned. So it is a phenomenal also historical record.
Yes.
There are things about trade, there are things about personalities, and they're just life lessons that spoke out to me. And I thought to myself, what a great compilation of work this is. When I asked Adele Onyango,
I love Adele.
who doesn't love Adele? She's amazing.
I know. She's amazing.
The one thing that struck me and the one thing I really liked about what you said is that it's Gina's voice. And I said, that's what I want.
Yeah.
Because at first I thought, is this a ghostwriter? Like,
No.
I was like, what do I hear? Is this a PR book, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a need for a PR book, and I think, you know, a lot of people wanted a PR book.
Yes.
And, you know, at some point I will get around to doing that because I think that's important. But I really thought my first book needed to be my story.
Yes.
And it's definitely my voice, and it's definitely my writings, and it's from my heart.
So, Gina, you've been a leader, captain of industry, builder of the PR industry, not just in Kenya, but regionally and across the continent. There are so many women who now believe that there is acceptance of women in leadership.
Sure.
We saw a lot win public office seats. We've seen a lot ascend into CEO, MD, director positions and board members. What is it that you can advise with regards to good governance, leadership, and not just the soft skills, but some of the harder skills that you had to acquire on your journey to excellence, that you can advise them to look out for and acquire now?
I think Wangari Maathai said it.
Yes.
You know, the higher you go, the fewer women you see. But we definitely see that changing.
Yes.
And as you just said, you know, we're seeing a lot more women in public sector, in private sector. There are definitely more women on boards.
Yes.
Still not enough. Still not enough in higher management positions. But we're getting there. I mean, there's definitely progress.
Yes.
For me, I think it's what is what unique offering are you bringing to the table? And once you know that, then you know you can set yourself apart. I think the problem that we've had with women in the past is that they count themselves out even when others were counting them in. You know, and so that level of confidence that they're bringing something to the table, that they're entitled to their seat at the table, is something that we're seeing more of, and very exciting. But the uniqueness of what you bring, the uniqueness of your skill, and then when you know what your skill is, just really honing down and being the best in that particular industry. I mean, for me, for instance, you know, a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're in marketing," and actually, I'm not in marketing. You know, PR was my niche. I wanted to be very, very good in that one particular area.
Yes.
And a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you know, there's no way a PR industry on its own is going to be sustainable business." But if I was very, very good at just that one thing, people would come to me because I was going to be the best. I was only going to focus on that one particular thing. So I think sometimes, you know, we get distracted by saying we can do all these different things. And for me at that moment, I wanted to hone in only on PR. So I think it's really finding out what you're very good at. What is your skill? What do you excel at?
Yes.
And I think the other thing that I've seen a lot of is the ability to communicate. You know, and getting our communications right, how we write letters, how we communicate with our clients, how we communicate with our stakeholders. And sometimes that's not very clear. And I do think, you know, that's something that we all need to get better at.
Yes.
Because that clears so many hurdles that come across. Sometimes we're just not able to communicate.
Yes.
And so, you know, the many women that are in these positions, you know, I really hope that they get the training that they need, not just the women, but the men too. It's like the training in handling media, in handling their audiences, and being able to, because a lot of the people that are now in public sector are quite young.
Yes.
And might not have had the adequate training that required. They're very bright,
Yes.
and you know they've got very good CVs. But I think getting them all-round training in, you know, how to handle public is really important.
Yes.
And I hope, and I think it will be. I think there's a determination by them to really excel at what they're doing.
I appreciate the fact that you're looking at leadership from a global perspective, not just adequate or being good for a local market or a regional market, but for a global platform.
For sure.
One thing that I would be amiss if I didn't touch would be health and wellness.
Sure.
It's been said that you think many things are important until you lose your health and you realize that's the only thing that's important.
Yeah.
So with all that you've had to achieve and accomplish and work for, with the grueling days and tumultuous nights, mental health and physical health, what is the Gina Din recipe for success? So
I've definitely had challenges at times at various points in my life with mental health.
Yes.
And so, but I sought help very early. I'm very fortunate to have got the right help and was not afraid to talk about it and to ask for help. I think the problem sometimes with mental health is there's a lot of shame around it, which is very sad. because I think, it's health, just like your body. It's like if you're not feeling well, you'll go to a doctor. If your body's not feeling well, you'll go to a doctor. So, but I'm big into self-care, and whether that's protecting my mind. So I'm very careful in what I digest from a digital point of view. I have a very clear digital diet. In that there's a lot of rubbish that I just won't watch.
Okay.
But I'm also very careful with what I eat.
Yes.
I exercise regularly. I'm very into taking care of my body, ensuring I have massages.
Yes.
I go for walks. I do yoga. I think self-care is so important. Life can be very short. You don't know what's around the corner. But if you can have your health, you can, then you're halfway through. That even if you do get sick, you're fit and you're strong and able to cope with whatever illness it is.
You're one of the most recognizable brands, names in this country. Did you ever at one point have any political thoughts or political aspirations?
No, I don't think you need to be in politics to make a difference. So I want to make a difference, and I hope I have made a difference. I know I've tried to contribute to a country that has given me so much. But I think there's a perception that you have to be in politics to make a difference, and you don't. I'm very interested in politics, definitely very interested in it. I've worked on, political campaigns in other parts of Africa, and I find it very fascinating to see what it takes to create a leader, political leader. But I do think that it's within all of us to make a difference. And that doesn't mean that we have to go and stand for office or whatever, but we can, in our area of influence, we can definitely make a difference. And I want to do that. I want to continue to do that.
It's beautiful that you've had this opportunity to transverse the continent and to be a daughter of Africa, not just representing Kenya, but even as you go abroad, highlighting the plights of women from across the continent. My question to you now, as you move into this new phase of growth, this new phase of understanding with regards to your background, your heritage, but the heritage of so many other women as you absorb their voices, what is it you feel just to the young woman? She could be in Kariuki, she could be in Eldoret, she could be in Mombasa, she could be in Ouagadougou. That from your personal overcoming of trials or challenges, or your celebration of triumphs, for example, you would just like to share with her. So basically, I'm asking that small daughter of Africa voice of Gina's.
I think we need to look at stories not just as ones that can malign or disempower.
Yes.
And I think it's I think there's a quote, but I can't remember where it came from. But stories have the ability to validate and empower.
Yes.
And so for me, it would say to the young woman there that's like, you have a story that is a positive story. So much that we have coming out of the continent can be very negative. And that's because as African women, we're not telling our own story. So the people that are telling our stories are talking about, the poverty, the famine, and the crime, and other important areas like FGM and child marriage, which are important, but they're not the only story.
Yes.
So we have great success stories of women on the continent, and so my whole, I want to be an advocate.
Yes.
For ensuring that African women tell their stories and tell them in their own words.
Beautiful. Gina Din, it has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Hosting you today and listening to you. Take me through a journey of pre-Gina Din PR, during your Gina Din PR journey, and now as Gina Din, daughter of Africa.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure, and thank you for coming to our home. And I look forward to many more conversations. And I look forward to hearing your story.
Indeed you will. Indeed you will. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this very special edition of 00 Direct, live from the home of Gina Din Kariuki.